What is going on, guys? Blacklisted Voice, episode 47. We have a returning guest, DJ Hillier. DJ was, I think, our second episode of the podcast.
That sounds right.
Yeah. We chatted about DJ's athletic career, which has just been resurrected again. You guys went out to
that's right. Yeah, we went out to the MAC. So yeah, it's been a couple years. I basically haven't competed since before COVID, but it wasn't anything that it wasn't by choice. Like I wanted to compete. It was just something where it was like, I like to compete on teams. And so it wasn't really lined up, or I didn't have an opportunity to do that per se. But yeah, we went out to the MAC and gosh, it's been a long time since I got to feel those feels of like competing. And it was so much adrenaline and it was so much fun. So I'm on a team with Anna Christensen, who's one of my athletes, Sammy, and then Roderick as well. And yeah, we had a blast. We took second place. There's some really good competitors there. They ran a tight ship. It was such a well-run competition, man. Like Rogue outfitted the whole thing. Everything was on time. They treated the athletes really nice. Obviously cash prizes helped too. So, but yeah, it was a really great event and something that I would recommend for anybody that's looking to get into team stuff.
Yeah. They've been doing it for quite a few years now. So it seems like it's they have it kind of down and like are crushing it.
Yeah, super dialed in. And plus, like they took the time to do like athlete surveys after, like, hey man, like how can we improve? Like they really wanted our feedback, which is cool because they're not getting complacent. They're always trying to push to be a little bit better. But as a seasoned veteran, I guess, in the sport, which is weird for me to say since I've been doing it for 8 or 9 years now, I would say that that's one of the best, like well-run competitions I've been to outside of, regionals and the games and things like that.
Yeah, dude, they had regionals like on point back in the day.
They did. And this honestly felt like it. Like the floor looked like it, dude. And all the rogue plates, things like that. The warm-up area was the biggest warm-up area I've ever been to at any competition. It was magnificent. It was so cool. And that's huge for CrossFit competitors. Like the worst thing, we could all sit there and imagine like that room that's not even a room, and there's like one assault bike in the corner, and you're like, you got to warm up. And sometimes that's the worst part of competing. And sometimes you got to just roll with it and be like, hey, this is CrossFit. But I think the competitions that prioritize that warm-up area, it can make a crucial difference in your experience as an athlete.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that I've personally just been like, well, it looks like I'm jogging for 5 minutes now, or told people to go run for 5 minutes. And then like,
right.
They hopefully brought some bands with them because there's a barbell in back.
Yeah, these guys had it hooked up. They had like 8 platforms in the back. They had all the plates ready because we had a max lift. And so that's the big thing too, is like when there's a max lift and there's only like 225 pounds in the back, you're like, well, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? And you're just waiting in a long line, like a porta potty line. You're just waiting for your turn.
Like, I'm about to go hit a 335 pound clean.
Yeah.
225 pounds to warm up with. Like, do I just hit
call it CrossFit though, right? That's CrossFit.
Constantly varied. Put your 1RM on the bar. And
that's right. Super healthy.
Yeah. That's sweet, man. So you had a good time?
Yeah, it was a really good time. So we came back. The girls are going to go do Wadapalooza here coming up on a team of 3 in the elite division. Roderick and I, we're going to go watch, maybe hang out a couple days. But we're just kind of getting ready for this next year. And the plan is to compete at a high level, hopefully make it back to the games. Those 2 were on Team Timberwolf last year, and so they're itching to get back and feel that again. And the goal is to get back to the games like we did in 16 and just kind of get those feels again, man. It's just, I missed it. Honestly, I missed competing. I missed being on the floor and I forgot what it was like. I forgot just the adrenaline that came with it and the satisfaction when you're done and the prep work that goes into it. It reminded me of like, it didn't take long, probably after the first lift. And I was like, man, I miss this. And I really remember why I love it so much.
Right. Yep. Totally. Yeah. It's a good time. There's not a lot like it in the world, especially from like in football, you have like your weekly things, but like this is like 1 or 3 days and every event is like hype inside of those 3 days. So it's a very unique experience inside of sport.
Especially for people like our age, like, you get through high school football, college football, whatever. And then like, that feeling, that rush that only comes a couple times in your life, maybe maybe when you get married or have a kid, or when like the big events happen, you kind of get that same like adrenaline
Yeah.
feel. But you're able to do it a couple times a year if you're competing in CrossFit, and you like getting that adrenaline. It was kind of funny. I took some pre-workout, and it was I've been doing the podium stuff, the Matt Fraser podium stuff.
Okay.
And so I've been taking it for a couple months, and I've really been liking it, like the beta alanine and like the jittery stuff. And you might remember, but I'm very caffeine sensitive, like a little bit of caffeine, and I'm like, I got to be done for the day. I can't have any past 2 o'clock, otherwise I'll be up at night. So I'm very caffeine sensitive. And so
Yeah.
for 4 or 5 months, I took this podium stuff. I loved it. And I'm like, all right, the week before, I'm going to not take any, so I can like crank up my resistance on it, so that I feel it more. Okay, so I'm like, yeah, this will work. It's a good idea. Yeah. So the whole week before, I don't take any. And then our first lift, we open with 100 max clean and jerk, 100 max snatch. And our lift was at like 10:05 a.m. So it's pretty early. And I start drinking this pre-workout, feeling the jitters, and I end up drinking the whole thing. And I go out, and we're getting in the corral, and I remember feeling like kind of dizzy a little bit and being like, is that water? I remember telling her, I was like, is that water? I need some water right now. Like I felt almost a little bit drunk because everything was like spinning. And so I was like, oh man, DJ, like you're such an idiot. You've been doing this for 8 years and you still haven't figured out that you need the whole day. You have this pre-workout for the whole day. You have 3 more events today, you idiot. And I had the whole thing right before the clean and jerk, and it worked out well. I matched my PR, and it was a blast, but then I got done and I was like, oh my gosh, I still have 3 more events, dude. You have to make that pre-workout last all freaking day. It's not just a shot that you do right before the first workout.
I mean, I guess for you it was.
It was. And looking back, it was like, man, you teach people this stuff all the time. Like, disperse it throughout the day, try to be evenly balanced, so then you don't like, I don't know, shit your brains out before the first workout.
It's one of those things though, like when you're looking over somebody and like helping somebody out at a competition, you can be the oversight on that, and you don't have to worry about like all the actual like, man, am I going to hit my lift or not? And that's like all you're focused on. So you're going to do, like, if you don't have somebody there, like you're going to do some dumb shit and like bound to happen.
It sounds like you've been there before. It sounds like you've had an experience like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I've done some dumb shit at a competition before. Probably forgot like
I was just excited, dude. Honestly, like I was just so excited to get back out there. So I just kept drinking it, warming up, and drinking it, warming up. And then by the time I knew it, I was like, shit, this is empty.
Like, man, this stuff's good. Why did I stay off of it?
It's so good. Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's sweet. So I guess since 2016, you've been starting to do a lot inside the fitness space. You're training a lot, you're coaching group classes and personal training, and you have your podcast for those that can't see in the background and are listening, the MiFit Podcast. And you started to really blow that up. So kind of tell people a little bit like everything you're kind of like involved in.
Yeah, so I'm the head coach of my gym, MiFit Fitness in CrossFit Lakeville. I do the programming there. I coach the majority of classes. I also do online programming for people specifically that they want to do either more outside of class, or maybe they're getting ready for a local competition. I think that's where a lot of people kind of come to me like 3 months out. They're like, hey, I want to get ready for this competition. And then I also do personal training stuff at the gym, where I work with a lot of field sport athletes, lacrosse players, football players, basketball players. Those are kind of the 3 sports that swimming as well, that I kind of cling on to the most. And then the podcast. Yeah. So I've been doing the podcast for almost 3 years now, which is so crazy. Time is just flying. We're almost at 150 episodes. We've put one out every single Tuesday ever since we started. And, it started a couple of years ago with Chris and I, and didn't really have an agenda. I didn't know where this was going to go. I just knew that I loved listening to podcasts, and I listen to a podcast every single day. I still do. And at the time I was like, instead of just listening to all these, what if I just made my own? Like, how hard could it be? And so took off, and I've been so fortunate to talk to some amazing individuals that I never would have
Yeah.
thought I would be able to spend an hour with, and let alone for free. I mean, some of these people I talk to, Kyle, they do keynotes for tens of thousands of dollars, and I'm hanging out
Right.
with them for free for an hour. So just very fortunate to be able to grow that side of things. It's a passion project of mine that, I get really excited about. We talk about that adrenaline on the floor. It's also adrenaline for me being able to have conversations with these people and do the prep work that goes into it. It's been just
Yeah.
a really fun passion project for me, and just it continued to grow. And yeah, we're now getting it's a little bit more of like Instagram stuff and seeing like how can I get more exposure on social medias. And so I hired somebody to help me with that. It's just been fun to kind of see it grow, and it's been really fun to get feedback from people. Like people I've never met, they'll message me like, "This is a great episode. This is what I got out of it," and it just feels good to know you're making a small difference somewhere else. And I tell people all the time, like even if nobody listened, I would still do it because I get personally selfishly, I get so much out of it. But
Yeah.
it's just fun to kind of pick people's brains and ultimately just be super curious.
Totally. Yeah. 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 It's I mean, I think I was on when you guys were still at the old location, and
Mhm.
in I guess the office you would call it, I think there was like a fridge and a bookshelf in there and a desk.
That's exactly right. You remember. Yeah, we've come a long way since then, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's been cool to watch it grow. It's been fun to watch it grow, and like it's awesome now.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, so you listed a lot of things that you do. So, and like obviously, anyone that's coached a group class before knows that, yeah, it's 60 minutes. It's really like 90 to an hour and 45.
Yep.
Even with personal training, like that can start to get a little bit creep over a little bit more. So you got a lot going on, especially being like the head coach. What kind of systems have you put in place, or like how do you structure your schedule to get all of those things done inside of the day and the week?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was recently on the CrossFit Athlete podcast with Jason Light, and he asked me the same question, and I'm still figuring it out. I'm still trying to figure out, what works best. I don't think I have anything mastered yet, but a couple things that work for me is I'm just very regimented in what I do. Every hour of every day, I know exactly what I'm doing. There's never a time where I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I'm very calculated that way. Something that's just a simple idea is, I have specific days for specific tasks. So I record my podcast on either Tuesdays or Thursdays. And I usually don't bend around that unless it's a guest that's like, really well known and they're overseas. Like last night I had to do one with a woman that lives in the UK. Like there's times
Mhm.
where you're going to have to do that, but I try to stay really close to a schedule
Yeah.
and also be okay with saying no to things that don't fit. I think the old me would have been just like, just do it all and it's okay. And you'll just
Yeah.
figure it out. And I still do that from time to time, but it's just trying to dial in exactly like, okay, these are your podcast days. These are your training days. If a new client wants to come in and train with me, like these are the time slots I have, and this is all I have that works for me. If it doesn't work, that's okay. I'll refer you to somebody that maybe can fit that time slot.
Yeah.
So that's really big for me too. And then also it sounds really silly, but on my MacBook Pro, I have these stickies. They're like little sticky notes on the desktop. And every day I have a sticky note and I have my, list of things, my agenda that I
Mhm.
have to get done. And that keeps me, it sounds so simple and nobody really taught me that. It's just something I did when I got this
Mhm.
MacBook Pro, 5, 6 years ago. And for me, it's just gratifying to be able to cross things off my list,
Yeah.
and it's motivating almost for me. So it's
Yeah.
super simple for me to be able to look at, okay, Friday, 12/17, here are the things I got to do. And that way I don't get distracted. I don't think about, oh, what do I have to do tomorrow? It's literally like, what do I have to do today? And that's it.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of things that have really helped me, saying no to things, dialing in the schedule, and then just trying not to overdo myself. I think that's another big part too, is I'm constantly, something I struggle with quite honestly is relaxing, sitting, not doing anything. I always feel like there's something I have to do. So I'm just trying to work on
Yeah.
making sure that I have good balance so that when I do have that time, I can fully disconnect, watch TV, hang out with Ashley, like whatever I have to do. So then that time, if I can calculate that in and I'm really good there, I'm going to be even better when I have to be productive, because so it's like CrossFit, right? Like if you
Yeah.
go at a super sub maximal level your whole life, like you never know what that high intensity is like. It's kind of the same thing. Like if I don't have rest days, then I'm not going to be able to go super high on other days. And sometimes in work, it's the same thing. I have to have a day or a couple hours or time where I'm not doing anything so that my productive days are even higher. That's a lesson that's takes a long time to develop, and I'm still working on it.
Yeah. 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 I think that's an ever evolving thing too, as like you start to as you start to kind of grow and like your name starts to get out there more and you start to like accrue more responsibilities, it's like figuring out
Yes.
how do I compartmentalize. I don't
Hmm.
think I can say that word, I guess.
Me neither. Me neither.
But like kind of lump things together so that they can become more efficient. And how do I shed something and like maybe pass it off to somebody else so that I can start, taking on this responsibility to like continue to grow as an individual. So I think that's
Yep.
like an ever evolving process as you grow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and when more responsibilities come, like that's going to be harder. I'm very like I should say fortunate, but I'm in a position right now in my life where I don't have kids, so that's different. Like when kids come along, I'm
Yeah.
sure things are going to change. But if I can start to dial in those habits now, I think that'll help me in later years.
Yeah, totally. I just read a book actually on it was like the former president or head of operations or athletic director, something like that, of Georgia Tech. It was autobiography, and he talked about how you break the day up into 3 different sections. You have your
Okay.
morning, lunch, and afternoon. And before each section of the day, you sit down and you write out exactly what you're going to do at what time of the day. And he's like, obviously, like there's going to be, things that come into play and like distractions. But I've been doing that for like the past like 2 weeks, similar to like your post-it note thing and like knowing each hour. And it is crazy how much more you can get done when you do that.
Totally, man. Yeah, you're dialed in. And then for me too, it's like for me, sometimes I'll struggle or I'll think about like what do I have to do tomorrow? And so this post-it note's actually really nice because like the Saturday, Sunday, they're closed. You can't even open them. So it's like it's literally just right in front of you.
Oh,
Like today, this is what I'm doing. And you're not looking ahead or trying to like get ahead. It's like these are the things you put on your calendar. So like get these things done. And then if and when you get done, then relax and don't worry about this stuff tomorrow because that'll come tomorrow.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you ever find
Yeah.
yourself like getting done early with things earlier than you expected, and then?
Yeah, 100%. And that's when I need to be okay with sitting still or spending time where I'm not spending time and like filling cups where that need to be filled. Right. So yeah, it's a constant, like you said, it's a constant, like, I don't want to say battle, but maybe it is a battle. Like it's a constant thing you got to be thinking about, got to be aware of. It's not just something that like we talk about, like floating through life. Like you got to be intentional about some of this stuff.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. That's cool. I didn't realize that you couldn't even open up the next post-it note.
Yeah, I mean, like you can if you click on it, but they're closed right now. So it's like you have to go out of your way to open it. So it's just nice to know that like it's closed down and mentally like you don't open that until Saturday. So
yeah. And you're like, you just kind of have to be a little bit diligent about not opening it.
Yeah, man, it's discipline, right? It's discipline to get your stuff done. It's discipline to stay on your schedule. It's discipline to know exactly what hour of every day you're doing everything. I think, yeah, discipline's probably the root of all this stuff that we're talking about.
Totally. Yeah. That's Jocko's big thing, right? Discipline.
Discipline is freedom. Yep.
Yeah. So you were chatting about how you kind of work with a lot of different people. Anna, competitive CrossFitter. You talked about working with a lot of field sport athletes and swimmers. And you have your clientele that does, group classes and wants to be healthy. How do you feel like working with all of these individuals has helped you become a better coach? And do you feel like there's any carryover from health to competitive exerciser to field sport athlete? And like, do all of those things kind of interconnect? There's different principles that you apply to them, or?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And I'd love to get your input too. I think there's a lot of carryover. I think coaching is coaching. I think if we're coaching games level athletes, coaching somebody that wants to make the JV lacrosse team, coaching is coaching, and some of the principles align. I think a lot of things, coaching that many different style of people, I think is good for my health, my brain, and just being not stuck into one type of person. It's also broadened my horizon into other professionals in these fields. So like basketball trainers or people that are nuanced in football training or different sports. It's just nice to not be zoomed in on one person's dogma way of thinking. So that's been really nice just to kind of get into different lanes. But the principle, I think that's what's funny. Like you think about strength principles. Like I don't care if you're a football player or a CrossFit Athlete, if you want to get stronger, some of those principles are the exact same. You talk about overload and you talk about rep schemes and all that stuff. Like there's not a lot that needs to be different, but the stuff that I come back to a lot is, even though we're dealing with a lot of different types of athletes, people are people, right? And people all they want to be heard, they want to be cared for. There's a lot of similarities in communication with people and how important that is. So some of those principles I think have been super crucial in helping me understand the differences between people. I think another thing too is being able to coach high level CrossFit athletes has helped me coach my GPP people. Being able to coach my GPP people has really helped me coach elite CrossFit level athletes, mostly because if I can explain something really well to my top level athletes, I should be able to explain it really well to my GPP people as well. I don't want to have people to talk over anybody just because of the level that they're at. So it challenges me too, because at 1 hour of the day, I'm working with somebody on speed mechanics for their field sport. And then the next hour we're doing clean and jerks and, pull-ups. So it's just, it keeps me fresh and it keeps a lot of variety and it keeps my job fun. I don't know if I would personally like, 8 hours of working with the same workout back to back to back, trying to get somebody ready for, the NFL combine or something like that. I'm sure it has its perks. I'm sure it's fun, but the variety keeps things fresh for me.
Totally. Yeah. Or just straight up 8 hours of coaching group classes. Like I remember doing like 3 in a row and being like, oh my God, here we go again.
Can't do it. Yeah, man. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So
absolutely. I'd love to hear what are your thoughts, man? Like I know you've over the years, you've worked with a couple different people too. Like what carryovers do you think there are?
I mean, some of the most fun I've had coaching is when I've had a lot of variety of individuals. And then you like to get said individual better at something, like you kind of have to do some research on it if it's not necessarily a field that you've been engulfed in your entire life, so like that research alone just allows you to be like, oh man, this would be great for this CrossFitter, or this would be great for this CrossFitter, or this would be great for this general health, or I've been dealing with this issue with this individual, and oh, look at that, there's something for it. Totally. So I think that's kind of, I mean, anytime you're able to kind of just expand your horizons inside of like your
Oh, I lost you, man. Are you there?
The benefits of having a couple different athletes doing different things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you blanked off a little bit there, so I caught the end of that though. I just want to make sure that we're good on your end.
Yeah,
are we good on your end?
I think we're good now. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. We're good.
Yeah, the internet's a little shaky in Georgia, I guess. But yeah,
just in all of Georgia, the whole net is shaky in the state of Georgia.
I mean, south, right?
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, I like just having carryover is huge for just developing your coaching abilities,
Yeah. And communicating abilities too. Like the more you can communicate with, you just talk about men and women, there's a ton of differences there, right? But how about people that are really skilled versus not very skilled, or some people are really overweight versus not overweight? I mean, a lot of people have different ideas, different growing up misconceptions, different stories in their head. You start to really dive into that stuff, man. Yeah, you become super versatile. And I think the more it's almost like your resume, like the more I can build my resume, not in the sense of like build people from like how many professional athletes do I have, but how many different types of people. Like you're going to attract more people that way too as a business owner. Like more people are going to recognize, like that's something that I've been working on too, is I am an elite CrossFit athlete and I work with some elite CrossFit athletes, but sometimes the stigma is like, oh, he only works with those, like I can't work with him because I'm just trying to get a pull up. So that's something quite honestly that I'm trying to like stop. Like, look guys, like just because I work out this way, this is hard. Like you've probably been there too. Like just because I work out this way doesn't mean that I only work with people this way. It doesn't have to be that way.
Well, and a lot of it too is like you've spent, 8 years you said in the sport.
Yep.
People see the end of the 8 years or the end of the 6 years or 7 years. They forget where people have started. So like you also played sports growing up, but like at some point in time, you had to get your first pull-up, you know, it
Mhm.
like you didn't just come out of the womb doing pull-ups. So like you had to get your first pull-up at some point in time. Maybe that came earlier in your life than somebody else, but you still had that experience. And now you have 8 years of experience, or I guess almost 30 years of experience now, with training that you can
Mhm.
draw from to help that individual who's now starting their journey of getting their first pull-up. I think people
Yeah.
forget, like, oh, you have had more experience than just, oh shit, this guy's competing at the games, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's a great point.
I think like that's an interesting thing to try and communicate to people is like, hey, I've been there. Like I've struggled to get a pull up before too. Just because I'm doing a lot now doesn't mean I was doing a lot back in the day. And like, let me try and apply some of the principles that have helped me. And then as a coach, you gain more and more and more knowledge. And you're like, okay, let me now try to apply some of those principles that I've used with other people. And just kind of like, yeah, communicating that is a little bit difficult, especially in today's day and age when everyone's just like, the only thing they remember is the last 2 or 3 seconds they saw on Instagram. So
So true, man. That was a really good point. That was really well said. I think that also leads me to to say like the principle that is steady across field sport athletes and anybody else that wants to improve their training is the idea of just progression. Like
yeah,
if somebody's coming to me and they want to improve their vertical, like, okay, great, man, but we're going to have, there's going to be a slow progression of this. Somebody wants to come be a better CrossFit athlete, like the understanding of, I don't care what your goal is, there has to be a slow, steady progression. That's a
yeah,
principle that is true beyond anybody that walks in the gym and talks to me. And that's
totally.
something that, like you said, everybody wants things and they want it right now. Where I heard a quote the other day, and it's a great one. It's basically, it's something like success often looks like long-term patience. And
Yeah, that's
how
great.
true is that? Like, dude, the people that
Yeah,
are patient for the longest term and like they're steady with it, they're consistent. I would somehow try to throw the word consistent in there somewhere too, but that's
yeah,
usually the people that strive to be in the game the longest and at the peak. And so
yeah,
communicating that with either a lacrosse player or a CrossFit athlete, I think is crucial.
totally. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. How, so what do you do with people that don't buy into that? That are like, oh, I need to be doing kipping pull-ups now.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, you can't even
Yeah.
do a pull-up. Like,
Yeah, man, so hard. This is something that I could talk for hours on too, because this is every day for me, right? Like I coach
yeah,
group classes where people want things, they want it now. And one of
yeah,
the ways people do, like I get asked all the time, hey, can we do a skills class? I want to learn bar muscle ups. And in
mm,
my head, I'm like, the person asking me doesn't have a strict pull up yet. How are
yeah,
we, how are we so off base here? So one way I do it, if we're just looking for like applicable and tactical ways for coaches, is I'll tell them like, here's the prerequisite, guys. For like, I just did a toast bar video, and I literally opened the video by saying, guys, if you want to get a toast bar, the first thing I want to see is you're able to do 2 to 3 strict pull-ups. And then
yeah,
explain why. Well, why? Because I want you to have the requisite strength, the scapular strength, before we start kipping back and forth. So I
right.
think one thing is just purely just educate them with like,
Yeah,
this is why there's prerequisites. And then all laying it out and trying to teach them like, this is where you start with the skill, and it's with no fatigue. Then
mm,
after you got it, then we can mix it with something with like a bike. And then after that, maybe we can mix it with another mix, but trying to educate them that this is a process, and the skill development process is much more than a 4 week cycle. This could be
yeah,
4 years. It could be
right,
4 decades, depending on who the fuck you are. Like, this could be a long time. So just trying
right.
to educate them, I think, is a really big one. And also just not getting mad about it, because it used to really fire me up where I'd be like, it was almost offensive, right? It
Yeah,
took me however long to get good, to get 10 unbroken muscle ups, and a
right.
person's coming up to me, they're like, I want to do that. And you're like, do you know how long that took me? Like, you don't understand the work that goes into that. And sometimes it's offensive because you're like, you're not here for hours watching me do the drill work that goes into this,
Yeah,
and the all
right.
the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into getting the skill. But I think it comes back to, I know I'm getting on a rant here, but I think it goes back to educating the client and having them understand that the process, and also giving them prerequisites, right? So I have a new girl that I work with, and she, wants to compete at a high level. And I basically, we're not going to kip until you can do 3 unbroken strict pull-ups. Once you
Mhm.
do that, I'm going to teach you how to kip. So now where's her mind at? Her mind's at, okay, this is my short-term goal here. I want to get these 3 strict pull-ups, and she's
Yeah.
almost there. So it's giving them these little wins along the way, or like,
Yeah.
rear foot elevated split squat. I want you to be able to do 8 reps, and I want you to be able to hold 50s before we start back squatting. It's like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
at 40 right now. I'm working my way. You're giving, like, it's almost like, I don't know, carrot and a stick, and you're kind of just dangling in front of them and kind of chasing something, but they also see where you're going. So it's like, God, is he ever going to program kipping toes to bar? Is that, I want to compete. Like, why hasn't he done that yet? It's like, no, they
Right.
understand. These are the steps that you need to take. And that's just another way to educate them. And so they can kind of grasp onto it a little bit more.
Totally. And I think too, like kind of spinning it back into like competitive CrossFitters, like competitive CrossFitters are pretty good about pushing their bodies, and like they're, for the most part, have had athletic backgrounds. They're probably at a little bit higher level than, your average gym goer or group class or somebody looking to get a pull up, whatever. And I think the biggest thing for them is when they get injured, convincing them that, hey, this time off is not going to be a detriment to you. We're going to need to take it so that you can progress further. Otherwise, you're just going to be running your head into a wall and you're going to go nowhere. You're going to be moving sideways in your fitness, if not down in your fitness. And I think that's kind of like the big thing that you have to explain to competitive CrossFitters and like get them to buy into that, is like the injury of things, if that makes sense.
So, and I would even like, dude, I would even dumb it down even further than that and say, like, it's okay to take a rest day.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to lose your gains on, I'm not even talking like a 3-week injury or tweak. I'm talking like, oh, you're going to be out of town Saturday, Sunday. Like, you're okay. Like, you're going to be fine. Come back on Monday. Like there's some of that too in competitive CrossFit, that too, where people are so wrapped up in, oh my God, I missed my session today, I'm going to lose all my gains.
Right.
Dude, you're not going to fit like Matt Frazier in one day, and you're not going to get fat like some fat dude in one day either. Like it's a process. It takes time.
Totally. I think there's actually a little bit less of that. That is one thing that I think Frazier did like pretty well for the sport, actually, is like,
I agree.
I take time off. Like I take 2 months off at the end of the year. He has his rest days during the week. And I think that was actually one thing that he did really well for the sport, was open people's eyes up to the fact that, like, oh, this guy isn't killing it year round. Like he treats this as an actual sport. Like there's time off. He's, doing other things, paddleboarding, running, whatever. Because like when Froning was like head honcho, it was like, dude, you got to slam your head into the wall, crazy amounts of volume, never take a rest day, hashtag compete every day. Like it was not good for the body during that time.
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree completely. I totally agree.
So, okay. So you have, like, if people have not listened to your podcast, you've had some pretty predominant coaches on your podcast, everywhere from strength and conditioning coaches in collegiate sports to pretty high level, big name CrossFitters to I think you had Julie Fouché on, MD, you like a wide range of people. How has that helped you become a better, we'll start with coach first, I guess.
Yeah. So again, I think it goes back to like how we talked about working with a multitude of different athletes. This helped me become a better coach, like in the gym. And then talking to people too has been really big. I think, a big thing for me is understanding the importance of character building, and talking to guys like Jim Lair and the guys over at What Drives Winning, and Jim Aframo, who wrote Champion's Mind. He's got a new book called The Leader's Mind that I'm excited to get into. And just the idea of and we have the poster in our gym that better people become better athletes. So I'm much more interested in building somebody's character, building their habits, building their lifestyle, doing that. And then some of those metrics in the gym are going to follow. And so those are some big things that I've learned from I talk to a lot of sports psychologists, because I find it super interesting. I love psychology, and that's been somebody that, people that I keep reaching out to, and they love to talk about some of the stuff. So yeah, character building has been a big topic of mine, and I try to do that with my own coaching as well. A big quote that came out from Dr. Jim Lair was, "Who you become as a result of the chase is the most important thing." I love that quote because it just talks about, if you win the CrossFit games, but hated getting there, you have no friends and you don't like yourself, dude, like you wasted 10 plus years getting there. So it just
Yeah.
reinforces the idea of character development, enjoying the process, and improving yourself in the pursuit of the whatever you're trying to get to in it from an athletic standpoint. So that's been a big one. Another big one from coaching. Yeah, lifestyle and habits. Another thing I learned from Jim Aftermo that I thought was really cool was just the idea of being ego oriented versus having a mastery approach. Basically, he
Mm.
talked about ego oriented is like, I want the 315-pound clean. I want the Instagram followers. I want this data. I want, the spotlight on me. Whereas
Mhm.
the mastery approach is like, I don't care about any of that outside stuff. I'm not motivated by any of that. I'm motivated by mastering the game within a game, or mastering a skill, or mastering
Mhm.
being able to have a consistent schedule, for God's sakes, or whatever it could be. But you kind of see a difference between that person who is externally motivated versus internally motivated, and how that
Yeah.
internally motivated person is going to end up going further by taking a more mastery approach. So those are a lot of things I kind of just threw at you there, but character development, lifestyle and habits, who you become as a result of the chase is the most important thing, than having a more like mastery approach. And it's also
Mhm.
interesting too, because I've talked to so many coaches, yet hardly ever, I've probably done 4 or 5 podcasts out of 150 on program design, and I've probably
Yeah.
done 100 on communication, psychology,
Yeah.
ego oriented versus mastery, like all that stuff. And that just goes to show me that in the hierarchy of things, program design is probably near the bottom. That's a
Yeah.
tough pill, I think, for people to swallow, because coaches are like, dude, like I love talking about numbers and 2059 and threshold, and like I love it too. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think that stuff comes much later. I think the person needs to come first.
Totally. Yeah. So I was actually going to try and lead into talking about how it's helped you as an individual, but guess you already hit that one.
Yeah. But, I mean, there's more things too, though. Like as an individual, I've learned how to ask better questions,
Yeah.
because I've had to come up with questions for people. So I've been getting more clear on, exactly what do I want to say, be more mindful with my word. I think that's been really big. I'm doing a ton on stoicism. I'm really big on stoicism.
Yeah.
Talking to a lot of professors, philosophers, authors. That's been really big. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's never ending. There's always something I'm taking out of these shows, right?
Right.
It's not just like one thing. There's so many.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess one thing I'm curious about is like how much, like, so you've talked to a lot of sports psychologists, like how much carryover is there from sports psychologist to sports psychologist? Do they all have kind of their own concept of like what they're looking for out of a mindset with an individual? Do they all have kind of their own philosophy on how they should, how an individual should think? Is it all dependent on that individual and they're just trying to like maximize that individual's like certain thought processes, or like, and minimize other thought processes?
Yeah, so I've done probably 12 to 15 episodes on sports psychology, and it's interesting because I'm just looking over here because I have all the books that they've written.
Yeah.
Each person, it's a similar theme,
Okay.
but in different verbiage, different words. And then
Okay.
also a lot of it comes back to personalization. So these guys, like Justin Sua, right? He works with the Tampa Bay Rays. He
Mhm.
works with each person individually in his
Mhm.
office. So like that's going to be an individual type approach depending on what the athlete is struggling with per se.
Mhm.
But some of the common themes like growth mindset, we've talked about this before, like that's when it comes down to it, I almost think that's the number one thing, is how to
Yeah.
have a more growth mindset approach. And so that's a big topic. But yeah, I think each sports psychologist has a couple different ways to go about it, but a lot of the common themes, or a lot of themes, are common across the board, which is good, I think, too. I mean, it shows that like there is a agreement here on what, you know a positive mindset looks like, and how to create mental flexibility or mental toughness. It's just in a little bit different words, I think.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So it's more like how these individuals are communicating it is like a little bit different person to person to person.
That's what I would say. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. It would be interesting to like kind of get them all together and see what their thoughts were on that statement, you know, because
Like if there were disagreement.
or like if they were in agreement with that statement of like, yeah, we're all kind of like
Oh,
preaching
sure.
the same thing, but like a little bit
Yeah.
like worded differently, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think about it kind of like, I don't know if this is right, but like, like I grew up in a Lutheran church, right? So it's like
Mhm.
all churches are all Christian churches are, speaking from the Bible, but are they saying it in different ways? They're pulling out
Yeah.
different messages, different
Okay.
passages. I kind of see,
Yeah.
I almost kind of see it that way, where
That
it's
makes,
like each church kind of hits you different, right? Like you listen to a sermon here and it might not hit, but you go to another
totally.
one and then that hits a little bit more. So I think that's
Yeah.
where like there's so many sports psychology books and some are really popular and some are not, but some, it just depends on how you perceive it, I think.
Yeah. And what message hits home with what individual? Because I think like,
Exactly. And what you're going through. Like some
yeah,
people are going through certain stuff. Some people are like, dude, I've never experienced anything close to that. I can't resonate.
yeah, yeah. Because I think like when I first started coaching, it was like, look, you're gonna, or I guess when I first started CrossFit, they're like, look, you're gonna have a coach that will explain something perfectly to you. And somebody's gonna come in and they're gonna give you this random fucking cue that doesn't make any sense. And you're gonna be like, oh, okay. You know? And it's just like the way that but it was like, it's the way that the message was delivered for you specifically. It clicked, you know? And that's
Totally.
probably somewhat similar to kind of what goes on with like sports psychology is the way that that individual is delivering the message just clicks for some people and it might not click for others, but the way another individual is delivering it will click for people.
Totally. And I think too, from like the patient side or the client side, you also have to be open to it too. Like you're talking
Yeah.
about, working with a person in the gym. Like if they're not open to your feedback, obviously it's not going to connect. If you're talking to a sports psychologist and you're like, you're just here because you have to be here, like you're not actually listening. I'm here because
Yeah.
I'm here so I don't get fined. Right. Then you're probably not going to respond well to what they're saying. So I think a part of it too is like the client has to be open to the advice or to the cue that's
Yeah.
coming your way.
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, yeah, that's cool. That's definitely. I wish that that field was continued to get funding and kind of research, and like more people would pay attention to that stuff. Because even like the average individual just going through life could learn so much just from having some sort of like challenge that they're trying to accomplish and being able to uh, learn the mindset skills to accomplish that challenge.
Yeah, man. Like the quote I like is mindset isn't everything, but everything is mindset.
Yeah,
And it's so true, right? And but I do think it is growing though. Like
yeah,
it used to be like in 2010, it was like a couple of the big sports, or sorry, a couple of the big teams would have a sports psychologist. Now almost every team has one. So I do think it's growing a little bit. And some of these books are coming out too. I think the biggest thing honestly is explaining to people that even though you're not an athlete, you can still benefit from some of these things. So like the
totally.
book I'm looking at right here is Life is Sport. That was a really good book. Dr. Jonathan Fader, who worked with the New York Giants, and I had
Okay.
him on the show. And his big premise in the beginning of the book was like, look, want you to treat life as a sport, and because
Mhm.
of that then you can start to understand some of these. Sport is just a way for me to use some analogies, because a lot of people can resonate and relate to those because they've been in a sport at one point or another. But
Yeah,
just getting through this misconception of just because you're not an athlete doesn't mean you can't benefit from a lot of these strategies of growth mindset, of creating a schedule, of having mental flexibility, etc. That's not just for the athlete.
right, right. Like you're probably in a career and that is technically a job, you know, like,
Absolutely.
and you can benefit from that. Even if you're just working out, 60 minutes a day, like you're in the office for 8+ hours a day, you know? So yeah, totally. That's cool. Okay. I guess we can start kind of, starting to wrap up here. But what are three big things you've learned from some of the people that you've had on your podcast? So like three big transfer overs.
Oof, three. Holy crap. Um,
You can just do one, too.
There's just so many, Kyle. Honestly,
Yeah.
I've been fortunate enough to learn so much from these people. I'm just trying to think what's kind of been recent. I think, like I said, the character things were big. Something else I think that's just top of mind right now, because I just got done talking to James Fitzgerald, is the idea of explaining to people, coaching people, that there's a difference between health and sport. We've talked
Okay.
about this a lot too, of like,
Yeah.
sport is short term and it's about prizes, points, and placing.
Mhm.
And health is long term. It's about vitality. It's about sustainability. It's about feeling good. It's about training and working out for your life outside of the gym. And I think
Mhm.
this is a topic that I'm really passionate about, mostly because I'm a coach in the CrossFit space. And so I kind of have to fight this battle of, I know you guys are doing CrossFit, but doesn't mean you have to compete in CrossFit. And that whole thing has been something that I think about quite often. And I know we've had a couple conversations about it too. So
Yeah.
um, that's been a lesson I think that has been needing to get brought up, and something that I'm still trying to echo out to people, my listeners, followers, people in my circle. What are your thoughts on that, man? Like, do you have this conversation or this thought?
I mean, in regards to that concept, it's an uphill battle until
Yeah.
CrossFit does something about it, you know? And it's
Yeah.
like there's absolutely a difference between competing and trying to be healthy. And like James, hit it on the head, is like sport is short term. There's like a 10-year window, if you're lucky 15, that you're going to be competing at a very high level for. And then you got to figure out how to live for another 50 plus years after that, or 40 plus years after that. And like if you want to have a high quality of life inside of those 40 years, like you're going to have to make some sacrifices for sport if you're looking at competing in the sport. Um, and if you're looking for health purposes, so like not looking to compete, so there's 60 years, you're going to have to, be smart and intelligent and come into the gym leaving the gym feeling better. You shouldn't ever leave the gym feeling just beat down and shitty, basically.
Right.
Um,
But the hard part is, and this is what he would talked about, is like, that we're fighting an uphill, and we're fighting it against media, because the media
yeah,
shows everything otherwise, right? They show
right.
calories burning and on the ground dying. So like, we're fighting not only an uphill battle in our industry, but also media. And like, we know how powerful the media is, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's with that's with everything in life right now, is like, uh, I guess getting into like maybe some like political philosophy, is like capitalism is has probably driven this like short-term attention span, like need things now attitude that we're in. And so with that, the most successful marketing is showing people that advertising and like burning calories, getting to a low body fat percentage, like, and then telling people that this is aesthetically pleasing, like you have to be like this individual. Because like shame and guilt and fear, like it sells really well,
Mhm.
and so like I think like trying to educate people about that and reverse it is very hard, because you have this system that's been set up to literally push selling and short-term selling. And there's a lot of people that aren't looking at the long-term process for anything nowadays.
Right.
And it's not going to be a very popular opinion when you tell somebody that, hey, this is going to take you 5 years, and like maybe you're not working with me for 5 years, but I'm going to set up a plan and a goal for you to get to this point in 5 years. And like, that's a
Mhm.
lifetime to people. It's really not, but it's a
Totally.
lifetime for people.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I guess that would be kind of my thought process on like the media that we're like battling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, James is talking about, like, he's like, I'll pull a client in and we'll talk about this stuff, and like we'll have a 2 hour conversation. We'll get them in the right headspace, and then they'll go out into the wilderness, go out into the world. They'll look at their phone, and right away they're right back to it. And it's like, that's
Dude,
how quick our minds are molded, like that, because of everything that's around us, right? So it's like,
yeah,
I mean, how many 2-hour conversations can you have with people? I mean, you just can't. So it's just, I think it's just constantly reminding people that things are long-term. But yeah, it's another thing too, when you see like, you know, you were talking about some of the advertisements, like how many ads do you see? It's like 4-week abs, or like,
Yeah.
you know, 6-week this, like it's advertised that way because people can grab onto, oh, it's only a month. Like I can do this, I can
Yeah.
do this, right?
Yeah.
It's easy,
Yeah.
like barrier to entry, right?
Right. Right. And like, look, maybe sometimes people freaking get hooked inside of that month and they create a lifestyle
Sure.
change. And all of a sudden they're like, you know, they've turned their life around. So like, not trying to knock on those, like it is a foot in the door for some people. And it is what some people need to get started. But like, how different would things be if it was like, hey, we're going to educate you on, we're doing this 4-week cycle to get your foot in the door, and we would like you to carry on after these 4 weeks and create a change, a positive change in your life. If these are things that you don't like about yourself, we can fix them, but it's going to take some time to fix them. But we've set up this fun thing for you to do to get your foot in the door and start working towards that change that you want, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's easier said than done. Another thing that I was thinking about too, a little bit off topic, that I've learned from my podcast last year is, have you ever read the book Never Split the Difference?
I've heard it, but I have not read it. Yeah.
Okay, so this is going to change your life, dude. So this is the book, Never Split the Difference. So the
Okay.
author is Chris Voss. He's a former FBI hostage negotiator.
No, I
And
did.
so I had him.
I'm sorry. I did read that. I listened to it.
You have read it. Okay.
Yeah.
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 Okay, great. So I reached out Chris on the show, and we had a great time. And I didn't even know, but my dad's a huge fan of Chris Voss, has been for many years. And so
Oh,
it was
good.
cool to share that. I had my dad on too. So it was us three doing the podcast. Then we
Oh,
actually
nice.
got to go out to Vegas and have dinner with him a couple weeks later, which was
Oh,
so
wow.
cool.
Okay.
It was epic. But
Yeah.
this guy is brilliant. And I'm not just
Yeah.
saying that. I mean, the tactics on negotiating is amazing and so interesting to me. And so
Yeah.
that's been really big, man, because we're constantly in negotiations as coaches,
Right.
as partners, anybody in life. Like you're always in some sort of a negotiation, whether you think you are or you're not. And so that's
Yeah.
been really fun for me this year, is to dive into more of his stuff, his masterclass, listening to more podcasts of his, having him and his son on my show, and
Yeah.
using his some of his tactical pieces in my daily life, and it
Yeah.
works. It works. It's so
Yeah.
cool. So that's
Yeah.
been another really, really cool thing that has nothing to do with training, but something I got because I've been doing this podcast, and I got a chance to talk with him, get to know him. And if
Yeah.
anybody is out there and is interested in it, check out Never Split the Difference. Check out his masterclass. There's some really cool practical practices that you can put into your daily life, and it's amazing how much it works. It's really cool.
Yeah. I always like in that book how he was like, he'd always be like, not very intelligent dude. It's like, dude, you're
Dude,
pretty up there.
he says that because he was born in Iowa, but it's like, dude, like, yeah, you were the lead FBI hostage negotiator for so many years, and now you're like a super successful author. And yeah, he's an incredible individual, and it's cool to learn from somebody like that. And it's cool to see how something not fitness related has helped me become a coach, right?
Totally. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was that was a pretty good book. There's definitely a lot of takeaways in it. I need to buy it and read it, because you only get so much out of it from listening to it, you know. So
Totally.
well, sweet. What are some of the goals that you have for this next year here?
Yeah, next year, you got a huge year coming, actually. So obviously we're going to be trying to push to qualify for the CrossFit Games as a team.
Yep.
We're going to be doing that out of my gym, which is great. I've never done that before. So we just have a big community that, like most gyms, we have a big community that wants to support, and we're very fortunate enough to have a pretty kick-ass gym itself. We have a great facility. So yeah, it's just going to be great to have everything here in house, not have to travel super far. So that's a big goal, is to push for the CrossFit Games. I'm getting married in September, so that's a big one too. I don't know if that's a goal or not, but that's something that's on my calendar. Yeah, it's accomplishment. Yeah, I get to cross it off, right? But no, as far as other things in 2022, those are kind of the big ones. I got another buddy that's getting married in Mexico, so we have a vacation there. But yeah, I think the big goal right now is CrossFit Games, and I don't know what'll happen after this year, if I'm going to continue doing this or what it'll look like. But basically that's the priority. And then everything else kind of just goes underneath it. So I know I'm training at this time of day. I'm not taking anything else at this time of day. Like I'm really prioritizing things around that. In the future years, I want to get into some like public speaking and things like that, but I don't want to add anything more to my plate right now because I want to be all in on being an athlete.
Totally. Yeah. That's sweet, man. It's been a long time coming since you've been like CrossFitting to get to that point. Like, it was kind of there in 2016, but like maybe your life wasn't set up exactly how you wanted it to be, and I think now it's like really starting to come to fruition where like that's something you can really focus in on and dial in on and make the most of it this year, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like
it's nice to have the experience too. Like that's been huge. Like all of our team is experienced, and so like we know what to expect. Like that's helpful too. Like the first time you bring somebody to a regional, like a lot of it's just, hey, we just need to get you experience. And this, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't count, but like we need to do this, and then we can start to progress. Like there's a progression to competing as well.
Right. I mean, that's what it was with our team in 2015 to 2016 was getting you guys experience. And that's what like our team down here this year was getting people experience, honestly. Like the team that we fielded this year was 100% talented enough to make it to the games, but outside of one individual, like none of those people had competed on a team at a high level before. And so it's like, dude, you guys just have to you have to do this, like whatever happens. And then next year you can start looking at creating expectations or setting goals, And I think there's some people that's a tough pill to swallow and a tough pill to understand is like, there aren't going to be expectations besides getting experience. And especially if like a lot of your athletes are at different like competition levels, if that makes sense, on the team,
Totally. Yeah. Well, that goes back to what we're talking about too, right? Like aggression. Like people want it now. People want we have a good team. Let's win right now. Like, how many times do we have to go over this? This is a huge thing. People need to understand is things take time. They take progression, and you need to be able to be patient. Like long-term success is often decoded as patience.
And things happen when the universe wants them to happen. They don't happen on your time.
True that, man. I mean, that's stoicism in a nutshell, right? Control you can control, and then like let go of everything else. That's a huge lesson that has changed my life completely. And it's one thing to say that out loud and like to have it on like your coffee mug, but once you live it, once you live that way, dude, it's life changing. Like it's way less stressful. You see things differently. Your whole lens changes when you just realize like, dude, like I have no control over that. So why am I stressing on that?
Yeah. There's been a thought that's been floating in my head for years. And it was like, if you truly want something, you have to be able to completely let go of it in order for you to accomplish it or get whatever it was that you wanted to get.
Interesting.
And I've seen that happen time and time again in my own life is like, as soon as I let something go, that thing starts to come to me, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, dude, that's cool. That's really cool.
So, well, cool, man. Thanks for coming on. It was great catching up again. We'll definitely have to
absolutely
again in another 40 episodes or whatever, maybe sooner.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it, man. Do you think you'll be back in Minnesota at any point?
I mean, someday I'll probably be back there.
Maybe the Granite Games again.
Depending on if we have anybody go, I'll be up.
Cool.
Have anybody go. I don't come up from probably September 30th to May 1st. May 15th.
I know. I'm aware.
There's a small window that I can make it up there for.
Well, you'll have to be up here September 9th of 2022. It's my wedding, so hopefully that's in your calendar.
That fits the block, September 30th.
That fits.
Yeah. So it starts to get a little cold there. So
I'm glad it works for you.
Yeah. Yeah, can you guys just bump that up 2 weeks?
Yeah. That'll go over well.
Yeah. If you need me to talk to Ashley, I can do it.
Yeah. I'll have you do that.
Well, sweet, man. Thanks for coming on. And how do people find you? How do people find your podcast?
Basically any podcast platform, the MiFit Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram too. I post week just like little teasers. So if you can't make the full episode, maybe you can get a couple ideas. So that's just at the MiFit Podcast. And then on Instagram, I'm at DJ Hillier. So if you want to follow me, I post some cool stuff every week. I try to do weekly reminders, things about mindset tips or something that I've learned from my podcast. So instead of like a weekly newsletter, it's kind of like a weekly Instagram post.
Sick. Well, sweet. Thanks for listening, guys. As always, you can find us on Instagram as well, blacklisted.hq. Like and subscribe on YouTube if you don't mind. And we will catch you guys next time.